It's time again for the Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.
Hi, I'm Chuck Chvala, former state Senate Majority Leader.
And I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
We're the Insiders. So, Scott, ROFR, which this is a real insider topic, right of first refusal. First of all, go back and explain to people again what it is. And is it dead? Is there any chance for anything to be done? And should it have been done? Give me your take.
So we have this huge need here in Wisconsin. It's going to be growing as we have more data centers and as we create more jobs around the state to improve the transmission lines across Wisconsin. And that infrastructure has to be paid for. Historically, the way it's been paid for is our local utilities work together through the American Transmission Company to build those lines, and then the ratepayers of the local utility companies pay for that. More recently, some people have said, we should just bid this out and have the lowest cost bidder do this because these are extremely expensive projects and we want to make sure that utility rates stay low. So you have two different views. Should we stick with the local folks who have been doing this all along, or should we bring in competition to see if we can hold down the prices? And two sides of the issue, and they're not particularly partisan. There are Democrats and Republicans on both sides of these issues. The main utility companies in Wisconsin have said, well, wait a minute, it's not just a matter of bidding it out to the lowest cost bidder. When you can do it through the utility company, it's shared by utilities throughout the Midwest. All of those ratepayers are chipping in because we all use those transmission lines. The argument on the other side is, well, this is, let's use the free market. Let's use competition to drive down the cost and get the lowest bidder to build that line. Just recently, the Regional Transmission Authority agreed to let two of these contracts out to companies from out of state. So now we'll test this argument, right? There's companies from out of state will they be hiring Wisconsin workers or bringing in their own workers? Will they really be able to hold on to the low bid? Does competition drive that price down, or were we better off doing it the usual way in which the local utility did it and it was shared? I think that the argument was so strong that they couldn't get to an answer in the legislature on the legislation. And now that the Regional Transmission Authority has essentially said we're letting out the contracts now for these bids, the issue has sort of gone away. We'll find out what the answer is and who was right about it.
Count me as a Democrat or or if I were in the legislature, someone who's totally on board with the right of first refusal. And here's what you have going on. And Scott's given a good description of what the questions are out there. What you've got going on, in my view, is we have a really effective system in Wisconsin. Our utilities do really quite a good job. You can argue about whether rates are too high. That is a legitimate question. But in terms of their capacity to get things done to keep us, so that we're all safe and warm, we've done really well. This bill says, yeah, those are the people who are going to get to do it. And by the way, as Scott pointed out, we're going to be able to share this cost with people outside of Wisconsin because we're part of the whole MISO system. Okay. So we're getting help from outside the state. We know that we do it well. We would like to instead have, let's say, a Texas company come in and do it. By the way, how did that work for Texas a couple of years ago when almost their entire system in some parts of the state went down when they had some snow and some ice? We have and here's one where you've got the larger utilities. They want this. These are the big multi-billion-dollar players. You've got the union, largely IBEW workers, who are the unionized guys who would probably be doing this for ATC. They want to do it. We're getting help from out of state, and we're going to take a risk. We're going to save, and some people have argued we won't save anything. But even if we saved a tiny amount of money, do we really want to do that as a state when it's Wisconsin jobs and Wisconsin utilities at stake? That just really does not make sense to me. Okay, so then why did this not pass? If you've got those kinds of things going your direction, why would something like this not pass? Well, On the Republican side, there were some people who are kind of free market purists and say, hey, whoever's the lowest, best, that's what we're going to do. The problem is lowest isn't always best. And that would be what I would be worried about here. And we're talking about our infrastructure for transmission that could bring down electricity for millions of people at a time. So I saw this as a no-brainer. So here's the deal. We call this program the Insiders. This is a place where I know in this case, I am not an insider. There is something going on here that I'm not aware of. Is there some money from some outside entity that thinks that they're going to get this and they've somehow gotten into the process? What is going on? Is it really just a philosophical debate? Maybe, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem right because I can't imagine why we wouldn't want good, well qualified union workers who want this work, do this, people who know our system, and by the way, who will be there after the fact to maintain the system, and our existing utilities who, yeah, maybe the prices should be lower, but they do a pretty darn good job of keeping us safe and warm. Why are we letting this go to somebody out of state, especially when we can get help from people outside of Wisconsin to help pay for this if we do it internally? It doesn't make sense. And maybe Scott can make sense of it for us.
Well, I can tell you this. There were times in the legislature where you're sitting there listening to the arguments and you're listening to one side and you go, oh, that makes sense. And then you listen to the other side and you go, oh, that's a good point. That makes sense too. And then you're like, who's right? And this is, I think, one of those cases where you're now going to have a real world experiment, right? We're just letting out multi-billion-dollar contracts for these things. We're going to see how it impacts our utility bills across the state of Wisconsin. We're going to see whether the jobs are Wisconsin people or they're people from out of state who are here temporarily to build those lines. It's just one of those things where people passionately make the arguments. You don't necessarily know what the right answer is. The legislature doesn't come to an answer. And now we're going to find out what the real world's going to show us was the impact. So,
no, Scott, I thought it was as clear as the nose on my face. And let's face it, it's a big nose. But I'll tell you what, I don't get it. I don't understand it, but we are where we are. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Insider with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.